Attorney David Daggett on WFMY News 2.
I wanted to know what victims and their families can do in these types of situations for compensation. And I'm joined now by Attorney David Daggett. And when we first talked to you today about this and we said, is there justice here? What was your response?
Well, my response was, I shook my head and I thought this sort of thing happens probably more than the public knows, and ultimately probably there isn't any justice.
What can we do compensation-wise?
Well, compensation-wise, there's several avenues. One, the criminal court can order restitution, which is for the criminal defendant who's now in jail to make payment. That's very limited, and it's also unlikely. The state of North Carolina has a Victims of Crime Compensation Fund. Again, that's very burdensome, that's limited and difficult to go through. And then there's a civil action that the Jones and Wheelers families can take against the defendant and to try to get compensation. Again, that's wrought with difficulties.
Okay, because that came up at our newsroom meeting this morning. We thought, okay, well, there'll be a civil suit, but you're saying they're probably not going to get much money from that either, and tell us why. Well,
I don't know the insides of this particular case, but typically 1 out of 7 people in North Carolina doesn't even have insurance. 75% of people have the minimum policy limits.
Which means that if you're doing a civil suit, you can't get anything more from the insurance.
You can't get anything more. That's limited to $30,000.
Okay.
The medical expenses in this case could far exceed that. It may have already.
Well, then people would say, well, why can't they go after his house or garnish his wages?
Go after the house, garnish the wages. It sounds easy. It's much more difficult than that. The families would have to take the cases all the way to judgment. Once they have a judgment, they would have to pursue the case to collection from the defendant who's in jail, who probably doesn't have anything anyway. It's an economic trap that probably isn't feasible for them to pursue. Garnishment, that only applies to government actions by the state or the federal government.
So the cold, hard fact about this is?
The cold, hard facts is that in situations like this, many times there's no justice.
That's tough to hear.
Yeah, the public all too often hears the exception, which is where they think somebody gets more justice.
Right.
Stories like this, where people don't even get any piece of justice, happen all too frequently.
That's the rule.
And this is a sad situation for that family.
Absolutely. All right. So many of you have questions about situations that really only a lawyer can answer, and News 2 is teaming up with the North Carolina Bar Association to get you those answers. It's an event called For All Service Day on Friday, March 2nd. You can call and talk to a lawyer for free, and we're going to give you that number to call again.